Creative coffee break back at you. Poland's got a public holiday today, so I'm actually very relaxed, sitting my cup of coffee in my hand, and I'm excited to bring my next guest on. So I'm especially excited to talk to my next guest because I think a lot of things have happened over the last couple of months, and some of us got kind of dropped into the space of thought leadership, sharing content, reaching out to people virtually. But I guess thought leadership is not only just a virtual exercise, but what do I know? So I reached out to my good friend Bill Sherman. He's the CIO and also a consultant at Thought Leadership Leverage. They also have an amazing podcast that covers the topic of thought leadership. And I met Bill a couple of years ago also at a Polish castle here in Wrocław somewhere, and we connected around the idea of design tools, and we had fun with that. And then we started realizing, hey, we're kindred spirits. We both come from the consulting world, and I'm super excited to bring Bill on board and have a conversation with him. And I also want to invite you to fire off questions, and I'm sure Bill will be able to kind of take care of us and take us through this. And without further ado, I want to introduce Bill. Bill, welcome to the show.
Hello, good to see you.
Thanks for joining me, and thanks for making the time. Always excited to have a conversation with you. And Bill, I just want to also give you a chance to just introduce yourself a little bit. I mean, you're located in Las Vegas. You have this amazing consultancy doing amazing stuff. Maybe just take us a little bit deeper in what brought you to this point of thought leadership leverage.
So for me, I fell into the world of thought leadership as a practice, much like 90% of the people that I know. Very few people, if you ask them at 4 years old what they want to be, very few kids say thought leadership practitioner. It's firefighter, astronaut, all those sorts of things. Same at college. I didn't do that. But I was working in the consulting world, like you mentioned, and I was doing organizational development consulting, working with clients on transformation, getting the right people to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons, and making sure they were rewarded. And so that was an organization or organizations that had a vision that they wanted to take to scale within their employees. And I had a client who was the CXO at a large tech company. And he'd written a book, and it was on the cover of Fast Company. And he said, hey, I wrote this book because that's what CXO officers do. But now people are reading the book and saying, how do I implement this? How do I take your ideas to action? And so it started out as almost this side practice of working with people who had good ideas. They'd written a book, or they were consultant or keynote speaker, and sort of spread word of mouth. But then 2013, I joined with my colleague Peter Winnick, and Thought Leadership Leverage is really about working with individuals and organizations that want to take ideas to scale. They've got a good idea, but they know that the idea isn't going to get attention or create impact just by putting it out into the world. You have to nurture the ideas.
And Bill, this is actually like leading me into the next question, right? The old classic question of define the damn thing, right? But
yeah,
I think it's important to note, because one thing that you keep on saying, and also in the material that you've shared with me, which probably also going to lead into the defining thing, because a lot of the things that I do in my design world, there's so much like buzzwords around it. And the other day I said to someone, we really need to take back ownership of some of these words. And I think in your world, the word thought leadership is one of those potential buzzwords, and I feel like you want to take ownership back of it. And I like the idea of like ideas, yes, but into action. Can you define what you see as thought leadership in your practice?
Well, and this is exactly what you said. A lot of people hear the term thought leadership, or they want to do thought leadership, but what is it? It's sort of this mystery box. Is it your best content marketing? Is it the same as content marketing? Is it something different? If so, how? And I guess where I land on thought leadership, and I've talked about taking ideas to scale, if I were to go one level deeper and give what I'd describe as a practitioner's definition, what I'd say is thought leadership is the act of peering around the corner, looking into the future and trying to make sense of it. You look at what the signal is, you try to figure out where the noise is, and you look for the insights that are relevant to people today. You bring those back to the right audience and you say, hey, here's something that's likely to happen, not guaranteed, but something, maybe a risk or an opportunity that you need to be prepared for, or a way to do something better. Let me share this insight with you. And here's what I suggest you do now to prepare for that opportunity or risk. If you're just staring into the future, you're not doing thought leadership. You've got to bring the idea back to a target audience and help them put it into practice.
And that's what I like about what you're saying, is like that help put them back into practice, right? Because I think sometimes what happens is that we, and I've also been guilty of it, like broadcasting noise, but then you're not really adding like some kind of implementation aspect to it. But then also the other thing that I noticed is that there is a ROI aspect to that, right? That you could drive business, you can drive revenue, these kind of things. Can you say a few things
So
about that?
Yeah, so I get a lot of questions, and I spend a fair amount of time working with large organizations that have heads of thought leadership. It's an actual function within the organization. Sometimes it's in marketing, sometimes it sits in comms or strategy. It depends based on the organization. But if you were to ask organizations, how do they use thought leadership? Firms that have sort of developed this role use it in a couple different ways. One, they'll use thought leadership to fill the pipeline in the short term, depending on what their sales cycle is. Two, they'll use thought leadership when they want to continue a conversation when it would be awkward or even inappropriate to have a sales conversation. Let me give you a couple examples of that.
Yes, please.
So I'm thinking of a firm that uses thought leadership. They're in the heavy industry and equipment space. So they build equipment for concrete and cement plants. They build equipment for mining, and they they know their list of buyers globally. There are not that many people that wake up on a Tuesday morning and say, we need to build a cement plant, right? That's a long decision. And there's only a few buyers in the world, right? You can make a list,
Correct.
maybe there are 200 of them. You can't go back to them every month and say, hey, are you ready to build? You have to find a way to stay in front of them and relevant to things they care about that help shape their thinking, so that when they're ready to buy and they enter the buying cycle, they're thinking of you. And one of two things: either you've influenced what they want to buy, whether that's an RFP or what they're shopping for, or they say, hey, I like the way you think. I definitely want you to bid and propose on this and help me solve it. The third way that thought leadership gets used is to influence how people think and act. That could be a C-level executive influencing the organization by sharing a vision and driving transformation. That could be an organization talking to their customers and prospects about the future, not the technology that they're selling today, but what will be possible 5, 10 years from now and how to prepare for it. It can also be a conversation with peers in industry and saying, we need to create standards so that, we don't have 32 different types of plugins for devices, USB, for example, right? And saying, let's standardize.
Yeah.
Those are the three ways that organizations are mostly using thought leadership today.
Bill, the other thing is, and this is a bit of a side question. I don't know why my mind went there, but I think it's because like we live in such a kind of interesting world at the moment, and perhaps you don't have a real clear answer, and maybe you're figuring it out yourself. But the one thing that I just thought about when you were talking about is like kind of in some instances, like thought leadership is also the voice of the organization or people in the organization, and now we're kind of also navigating Black Lives Matter. Global warming, gender equality, all these kind of things. And I don't want to like, it might overlap a little bit of PR and like making sure that you don't step in the wrong places. But in your practice, have you been able, like, have you guys been dealing with that kind of topics as well as it comes up? Because I think everybody needs to say something at some stage about these important topics.
So if you look at issues such as ESG or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are issues where, in many cases, they went from side conversations to now you have employees, shareholders, and even in many organizations, the board demanding that the C suite start talking about this
Yeah,
and be involved, right? And it used to be, it's like, oh, that's an issue that we just don't get involved in, right?
exactly.
Now there's a strong expectation. What I see from organizations that use thought leadership, whether they're for profit or not for profit, is there are a lot of projects that require more effort and collaboration to solve a problem or to create an opportunity than one individual or one organization could do on their own. So let me give an example. Dementia, right? And dementia care. So there is an organization doing thought leadership around dementia care. And the reason it came to be was they looked at the landscape and said, look, we know there's a lot of money and effort being poured to treatment and to medication and basically solving the disease as a problem. But let's think about the experience of a patient with dementia and the experience of a family with a patient with dementia. How do we make dementia care easier for people who are having struggling with memory and with details? And so this organization exercised convening authority. They're respected in their space. They went to a lot of pharmaceutical companies. They went to hospital organizations. They went to researchers. They went to investors, and they said, here's an area that's falling through the cracks. None of us can solve it on our own, but we need to step up collectively to give it attention because what we're doing is not right and we can do better. And so, from that aspect, whatever the issue is, that ability to use thought leadership to create convening authority, to shine a spotlight on a problem and say, we can do better, and we're going to amplify the voices of people who want to do better.
Well, I like that idea of actually having not just broadcasting, but then also having collaboration come into play. It's a really interesting thought, if I may say. So, so Bill, the other thing I wanted to just add to the conversation, and now going into a bit of a different aspect of this is something that we've been kind of talking in our private conversations a little bit. And it's kind of like it's a weird thing because like when I look at you, like for me, like, you're a kindred spirit, a consultant, and we usually kind of work in the background, pulling the levers and helping our clients,
Hmm.
not really
Hmm.
stepping into the limelight
It's a
ourselves.
consigliere role. You're an
Yeah,
advisor. You're not on stage.
yeah, that's the thing, right? So we facilitate the being on stage, and then the strange thing happened. Now, I don't want to pull a parallel to you because you're doing your own activities and you have all the secrets. But you mentioned something that is kind of nice, is the accidental thought leader. And I think some
Hmm.
of us have fallen into that role where it's slightly different. We're going to dip into some frameworks and stuff that you're going to show us in a few, like the structural things, which I love. But there's also the prototyping, accidental, figuring this thing out kind of thing. And can you say a little bit about that? You started talking about it before the show, but I want to give you the stage too.
Absolutely. So just like I described in my bio, that I got into thought leadership accidentally, and then I had to sort of reverse engineer and say, "Oh, my entire career is about helping ideas come to scale." Most people fall into thought leadership accidentally. That could be a case where someone asks them to write a white paper or to create a blog, or could you appear as a guest on the podcast or come talk to our group or chapter? And they do it a couple times, word spreads, and they enjoy it. Maybe they enjoy speaking more than writing or writing more than speaking. But what they've realized is they go from asking the question, do I have something to say, to a different question. They say, hey, I'm talking about this. What impact do I want to create? And who should I be talking to? One of the things that happens when you start in thought leadership is you often have motion without direction. because you don't have the strategy piece on it. And so you can make this sort of commitment. It's sort of like dieting. Oh, I'll post on LinkedIn every day for 30 days. Great. Who are you trying to reach? And is it any reader? Congratulations, all 750 million people on LinkedIn. If you're trying to be interesting to 750 million people, I don't know how to do that. Maybe somebody can be interesting to everyone,
Yeah.
but I'd rather be and that's why I'm not interested in the number of likes or the number of comments. I look at, am I reaching the people that I want to have a conversation with? And if I'm doing that, it might be as simple as I create an asset for one person. But if it's the right person, I can reach scale and impact by getting them the board with my idea.
Spot on. I love that. And a question for you, because and this is why you're here, because I'm kind of I have you on the show under the guise of free consulting, right? I mean, I'm
Mhm.
pretending that you're on the show, but it's just actually free
Oh,
consulting for
absolutely. Yeah.
myself.
We just happen to be recording this,
Yeah,
right?
it's just,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's how I roll. The
Hmm.
thing is, one of the things that I've been, because I dropped into this. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a thought leader, but I realized in desperation that I had to get my voice out, especially when the pandemic started, because I can't go out and actually see my clients anymore. I don't have a physical interaction with
You
clients.
can't
So
break bread with them and sit down or whiteboard with
exactly.
them in the room, all the smelly markers and all the bad coffee and everything that goes with an on-site.
All
But
those things, all those things.
mhm,
And how ideally I miss them. No, some of them.
we had to adapt without sticky notes, right?
Exactly. I threw them away. Um,
Hmm.
so I think in my case, and perhaps this is where we're probably at some stage going to lead into more of the structures that you have in place, so that people don't make the same mistakes I have done. But I started sharing ideas and content to see where it hooks. I had a kind of idea where my audience is, but I started sharing. Do you think that is a wrong approach to try and prototype and test and pivot in your thought leadership space, or is it better to like really plan things out, or is it two different approaches to get to the same goal?
So they are two different approaches, but the problem is if you wait to have everything perfect before you start putting it out, then you're following the waterfall problem and you may have created content that no one cares about, right? And I've seen it happen where someone has spent 2 years writing their book, right? They put it out in the world and they realize, oh, nobody's reading it.
Yeah.
Well, have you built an audience? Do they know what you stand for? No. And so I'm a strong believer in what I call minimum viable thought leadership. It comes out of the rapid prototypings and entrepreneurial mindset, that I would rather work in public and share ideas that are not perfectly formed. And I frame it in a specific way. I don't say definitively there are 7 steps in this process because as if I'm working on it yet, I don't know. I'm seeking feedback, right?
Yeah.
So the classic example in the leadership, the one that comes to my mind is Stephen Covey writes a book in the late 20th century called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Great title, clear platform. People go, oh, there are 7 habits. They're tied to highly effective people. I want to read the book and know what he's talking about, right? If he had 2 years later come back and said, it's not really 7, there are only 3, and 2 of them I didn't even talk about in the book, people go, you don't know what you're talking about, right? But let's say you post on LinkedIn and you say, hey, I'm really interested in how people become highly effective. Here's a habit that I see. Let me describe it. What do you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you see the world differently? Then you're putting ideas out there in a way where you can invite feedback and you can test your framework without having anybody saying, oh, you put that into print and it's stupid.
Yeah. So you actually kind of also you can also use thought leadership in a way to construct something bigger, right? So in this
Mhm.
example, for example, you do a lot of. You probably have to be consistent, but then build around an idea, see what the reaction is, and then you can build something bigger off of that. Like it could be a book, it could be documentary or whatever it is, but you're testing your
Well, and I
ideas.
know you're a fan of Legos, okay?
Indeed.
I think of ideas as individual Lego bricks, okay? And then you take the ideas, you put them together and say, how can I assemble them in a way that's interesting to me as well as relevant to some audience that's out there? And both of those have to be true. If it's not relevant, you're not going to build an audience. If it's not interesting to you, you run into a pitfall because your audience will never care about a topic more than you do. And so if you're going, oh gosh, I've got to talk about this again and I'm so bored of it, guess what? Everybody is looking at their phone or looking to try and figure out how quickly can they bail.
Exactly. It makes sense. It makes sense. And Bill, like, can we start dipping into a
Yeah, sure.
few things?
You
Because
tell me where to go.
you shared some things, but before we do that, I was going to flip over here. We haven't spoken a lot, and I didn't give you a chance to really dip into, like, I think it's probably one of the flagships of, I mean, I don't want to invite people to go to your website. There's a lot of content being created. The flagship is potentially the podcast that you co-host with your partner. It's been going for a while. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I mean, I have a few guests over here, for example, but there's tons. I mean, you're sitting on episode 316. How's that been as a thought leadership vehicle for you and Peter, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple things here on the podcast. It began as an experiment, and we said we knew enough people that we could wrangle up 25, 30 people to just tap and say, hey, we're going to try this. Let's see if it works. And we said, we'll commit long enough to see if it works. Okay. But there's a joy in being a host, and you know it, and I'm on the guest side. But when you're a host, you get to ask the questions you want to ask, right?
Exactly.
And so, like you said, free consulting, it's a learning process, right? You're constantly learning, you're getting a pulse of the world, and you're seeing different perspectives. And so for me, the guests that I interview are heads of thought leadership or people who are doing thought leadership work in large organizations. So if you look, for example, at episode 316, which is up there, that's Jim Adler. Jim's in San Francisco. He, a few years ago, started an in-house venture capital fund for Toyota, specifically focused around AI. And I had a chance to sit down with Jim and have a conversation around the relationship between thought leadership and venture capital, right? And how both of them really at their heart are about taking ideas to scale. And so you've got Toyota, masters of scale, Silicon Valley and San Francisco in the Bay, which is startup and ideation, and this just wonderful intersection between how do you nurture an idea, because VCs are looking for the same thing. They're looking for the hit, but they know that every company isn't going to be a success. And that's the same thing for thought leadership.
That's awesome. I get excited, right? So the thing is, there is a model that you have that you guys have drawn up. I want to bring it on screen, but also just to contextualize and make sure here, because I have a fair amount of my audience who is in corporation, and then you have people like me trying to carve out a little bit of his own life and entrepreneurship, and a lot of the things that you're talking about is relevant for both, right? It's just the audience and all these differ a little bit. So, Bill, if I may, I just want to quickly click over to the first framework that you've, and this is I think this is one of the kind of things that we first started speaking about when you started sharing some of the things that you guys do is the 4 elements of thought leadership. And if you can talk a little bit through this and share that with the audience, I think there's some really cool constructs here.
So this is one of the frameworks that started in a moleskin over years of consulting for me, whereas I took more notes, and I struggled to try and define a practitioner's framework. Whether you're working for an organization, you're trying to do thought leadership as a practitioner on your own as an independent, you need to have a sense of what levers are there and how can I make good better, right?
Exactly.
And where are the gaps that I need to close? And so this framework is designed to answer those questions. It's not a user's framework for thought leadership. It's a practitioner's framework. And so I'll start up in the upper left-hand corner with ideas. Ideas are sort of the atoms of thought leadership, if you will. They're the essential heart that conveys meaning or an insight, usually in a single sentence. And so you don't, if your idea is a paragraph or even a page, it's too long. What you're thinking about an idea is that single sentence where you tell it to someone, they look for a moment and they go, oh,
Uh-huh.
I see the world differently, right? They may not know what to do, but you've just opened a door, just a little crack. Okay. A good idea could be a sentence. It could also be a diagram. We're both consultants. I love 2x2
Oh
matrices.
yeah.
And so, yeah, a good 2x2 is an idea,
I'm
right?
I'm more of a Venn guy myself, you know. The old Venn
Yeah,
diagram, you
same
know,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. But showing relationships between concepts is an idea.
Yeah.
Okay. And often a successful idea that reaches scale is very simple and elegant. And so one of the things that you want to do is know what your ideas are that you want to focus on, because then those ideas can be delivered to an audience in many different ways and made relevant to them. But if you're not clear on your ideas, then everything else is squishy.
Yeah.
Let's move down to the lower left quadrant, content. And I use the term content a little bit differently than a content marketer would. Okay. This is one of the places where you talk about reclaiming. So, content for me consists of the story, the data, the examples, the case studies that bring the ideas to life. Okay. They're not in any specific container. We'll talk about containers in a moment.
Yeah.
But I could tell you a story here in the live stream. I could also write it out in a case study. But those building blocks can be put in different containers. If I have data, I can put it on a slide, I can cite it in a conversation,
Exactly.
but that content needs to be organized and you need to know how it supports your ideas. What we suggest is often creating a content library that ties to your ideas, because often you come across something cool that fits with your point of view or your insight, but you're like, oh, what did I see in strategy and business? Or what was that piece in HBR where they had a statistic? You've got to grab those things and capture them. Otherwise, you lose track of it. So that's content. Offerings are the containers that you put ideas and content within. And an offering doesn't have to be something that you sell. It could be
Okay.
something where there is no cost. It could be free. In my language, this live stream and the recording are both separate offerings, because an offering is how someone encounters your ideas and your content.
I
Okay.
love it. Yeah.
So podcast, books, white paper, short form video, the list goes on and on. You could have a price tag with it. Sign up for this course, or we'll do consulting for you for an organizational diagnostic, or it might not. The last one is the platform. And the way that I think of a platform is not technology, like we're on Skype here, for example,
Yeah.
recording. People think software platform. I'm not talking about platform. I'm talking about something different. Let me give you an analogy. A lot of individuals have been working on building their personal brand. I want you to think about that as stepping up onto a stage
Okay.
and someone shining the spotlight on you. Okay. That's a personal brand. A platform is putting the ideas on stage and shining the spotlight on your ideas, not on you. Now, you may be the roadie who's setting up the speakers and doing all the stuff back of house, but essentially, you want to reach a point. If you want your ideas to reach scale, your ideas have to stand on stage, not you.
Wow, that's a strong. I mean, it reminds me of a good friend of mine. Also talks about putting the ideas first, and I think because as I'm listening to you, I'm trying to figure out where I've been making mistakes or where potential mistakes can come in. And I think, like, if I look at this model, I think probably there's two for me that jump out. First is jumping into the content without ideas. And then the
Hmm.
second risk that you take is that jumping or putting yourself on the platform instead of the actual idea, which is that your same experience, like working with the clients that, and it's not
It's
evil,
common.
but it's,
Hmm.
I feel like I mean, we can generate, I mean, when I started doing some of the stuff I do, like you start latching onto the live stream and the video and you forget that there's actually ideas that you need to share.
The platform and the ideas help you be relevant to specific people. As I said, like LinkedIn, for example, 750 million people, right? We don't have
Exactly.
that reach. We don't have that audience. We'd be terrible if we tried to reach all 750 million people. So instead, we choose ideas and we define a platform that says, okay, we're going to be irrelevant to 99.9999% of the world, but that fraction of 1%, we want to be talking to them like we're in the room, sitting down, having coffee. And it's like, oh my gosh, I was just stressed about this last night and trying to figure out how the heck do I solve it. If you have that, if you have that relevance and focus, then business follows.
Amazing. And I just want to go to the next slide because I think you dive a little bit deeper into or just contextualize this a little bit more. So the ideas
Yeah.
then related to insightful thinking, if you can talk a little bit about how that comes into play now.
Yeah. So if you look at the reason that this is divided into four, there are actually two axes. And this is sort of my consulting side
Yeah.
coming in. The left-hand side is thinking, the ideas and the content. That's where you're looking for those connections and ahas. The right-hand side is when you're thinking about how do I take this to the world? How will people encounter my ideas? How will people encounter my stories? Now, you're not talking to them here. You're not saying, I'm going to do LinkedIn on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. You're just saying, I'm going to do LinkedIn and I'll engage a certain audience, right? If you look at the y axis, up top, simple. An idea is a sentence or two. A platform is typically a couple of words. It's a phrase
Yeah.
most often. Okay. Your content and your offerings, that's expanded. That's a half an hour conversation on what is this thought leadership thing and why should I care?
It's amazing. I love it. I love it. I can't believe you're giving it away for free. Thought leadership right here.
If you don't define what it is incredibly hard for people to understand. And I've seen so many times people go, oh, content marketing and thought leadership are the same. And it's like,
No.
no, they serve different purposes. I'm not dissing on content marketing. It serves an incredibly important purpose, but thought leadership is very different in the goals that you can achieve.
And I think, because that would have been my next question. What's the difference between content marketing and then thought leadership? And if I'm a venture, and then you can riff if I'm right, is that I can at least speak to thought leadership is starting with the idea. Like the core is the
Mhm.
idea and then figuring out how that gets expressed. But then content marketing is more focusing around maybe products, services, the organization, that kind of stuff, right?
Ultimately, content marketing is trying to fill a sales pipeline. And that's
Exactly.
where there's, to use your point on Venn diagram, there's overlap. Remember, I talked about those three use cases.
Yeah.
Thought leadership can also be used to fill a sales pipeline. And people forget that you can use thought leadership when you're not trying to sell, but maybe you're trying to persuade with an idea or sustain a conversation or build a relationship. Those are things that content marketing is ill suited to achieve.
Exactly. And well, I might be jumping here, right? Because I think the next thing we want to talk about is the layers. So let's do that. Like, what is the layers of thought leadership? Because there's an important one coming up that kind of just jump. Like, I should have put that one first, but this is the thought leadership stances that you also referenced in one of your
Let's go to
mailers.
layers. Let's
Yeah,
let's jump to layers.
and let's go to layers. I think because the next one also is I think is the right hook, the one after. But let's
Okay.
talk about
So
layers. Yeah.
with layers on this, There's an evolutionary process, sort of like a river deposits sediment at the end of the river, in the mouth of the river, and that eventually turns into rock and, it evolves. I think of thought leadership between a continuum between sand and bedrock. And often when you start out, it's sort of like wandering out with a bucket and a pail onto an empty beach, and you're like, I could talk about anything. What the heck am I going to talk about? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you may feel that everything is sand. You can scoop it. It has no structure. You can build a sand castle. You can build a marble raceway trackway. You can do all these cool things with sand, but it's transitory. The tide comes in, it's washed away, right? The other side is bedrock. When you've been in thought leadership for a while, you have things which are your core ideas. Going back to that framework, those ideas that are the center of everything you talk about, and you talk about them in a very similar way. So, for example, I didn't talk today about the 6 elements of thought leadership. I talked about 4. You check when I talk about what is thought leadership, you'll see the same bedrock every single time. In the middle is clay. It's not rock, it's not sand, it's got some structure, okay? But it's malleable, right? And so with the clay, I think of that as where you bring in the stories, the examples, the context that is necessary to create meaning for your specific audience. And so clay is when you go into the content library and you say, what am I going to pull out here? What am I going to layer onto the bedrock so that others get a sense of what you're talking about?
Wow.
Because if I just talked about bedrock all the time, not so exciting, right? That's sort of like looking at framework after framework with no story. That's boring.
Exactly. And you know what, Bill, like you're making me think now about something because I mean, as a consultant and looking at my business, and I'm playing open cards here on the live stream so clients don't kick my butt, but looking at what I'm currently doing. So for example, I think what's happening with me is that I'm trying to think about a lot of the content that I'm creating in a kind of digital marketing way, right? So this live stream, I want this to be the thought leadership, right? So for example, I have you on, we're having that deep conversation. But then what happens, and you've been experiencing it, is that I use some of my other posts and sharing to drive awareness of this back to this event. And what I'm starting to think about, what I could probably change in my approach is that wherever I'm talking about this event, I actually need to share an idea. Or, I mean, I try to do that, right? For example, with this stream, I like the thought of ideas into action. I wanted to share that. And if you wanted to know more, come back here. But am I approaching this wrong? Do you think that could I, especially for entrepreneurs like myself, where we're talking in different channels and different places all the time, and sometimes we turn a lot of these channels into broadcasting. Hey, come here. I want you to come to this place, rather than sharing something cool and saying, hey, here's a good idea. If you want more, come here.
So let's dwell on that for a moment, and we'll put this in the consulting bucket, right?
Exactly.
So a couple of things are true. One, when you try to reach an audience through narrowcasting and your specific audience, they often need to hear an idea more than once before it'll stick. And so just because you said something once on LinkedIn in a live stream, not everybody was paying attention.
Exactly.
So repetition matters. The second thing that I would say on that is, let me use the example of our podcast. So when I kick off the podcast, I'll welcome people to it and I'll say, today's topic is around organizational thought leadership. The people who create, curate, and deploy thought leadership on behalf of their organization. How do they do it? How do they reach scale? This is the focus of my podcast. My guest today is, and I introduce them.
Yeah.
And so I have an underlying question that I'm pursuing. People know when they're coming what flavor of ice cream they're getting, and they can self-select out. If they hate chocolate, they can bail and they say, that's
Eh,
not relevant to me, right? Whereas if I'm just Bill who has an event, which is a LinkedIn Live or a podcast, and I talk to interesting people, people don't know if that episode's for them. They don't know why they're tuning in, and it's competing for every other possible demand on their time. I want to be creating assets that are highly relevant. And so I move instead of thinking about the event or the asset, and I would describe this as an event we're doing now.
yeah,
Instead, focus on the audience and to say, okay, who's on the other side of the platform and how can we be deeply relevant to them? And when you make that switch from I have a container, that offering that I need to fill, into how am I going to be relevant time and again and repeat my message, it's message discipline. It really is.
yeah. It's not easy. I mean,
No,
it's rigor. Bill, I mean, we're running a little bit out of time, but I want to see if I can squeeze one more thing out of you
sure.
for this stream. And this is the
Squeeze
one
away.
that's driving me nuts. It's the
Okay.
first element, ideas. Where the hell do they come from? Because I think getting the voice out, stepping on stage, has been okay for me, but
Mhm.
sometimes like coming up, and I know it's not content ideas, it's the ideas, the flag that you plant. Like, what do
Mhm.
you like? How do you come up with those?
So I think a lot of people, and here I'm going to go through a framework that I have, and I'm a big believer both in frameworks and visuals.
That's why we're friends, by
This
the way.
exactly,
Yeah,
right? So I think a lot of people believe that ideas come, and they mistakenly believe this, from you go off, go to the woods, or you sit in your office and you think deep thoughts, right? And then this flash of inspiration comes. You're Archimedes in the bathtub, you shout eureka, and you run through the street, right? And I call that the myth of the smith, sort of like the blacksmith who goes and takes raw metal, throws it into the forge, heats it up, pulls it out, and then hammers away on an idea until you've created the object. That's the myth that a lot of us get sucked into when we think thought leadership.
yeah,
And if you ask the people who have had transformative ideas, very few would say that they've forged a new idea. So where do they come from? They come from the other three. I'll talk to them briefly. The first one is sharpen. That's where you take an existing idea in your field and you put a new edge on it, just like you would sharpen a
love it.
kitchen knife. And you might have a new use case or a new way of thinking and say, maybe instead of this step, we use that step, or this audience, we use that audience. That's sharpen. Weld is a little bit different. You take an idea from one field and you put it against an idea in a second field. And when you do that, you weld them together. Just like a welder will run a seam, the insights appear in the seam between the ideas from two fields. Okay. A lot of thought leadership work happens in sharpen and weld. The third pattern that I see is transporting. That's where you take an idea which is common in your world and that every practitioner in your field knows. And it's like, oh, that's 101. We studied that in college. But what you do is you transport it to an audience who hasn't encountered that idea before. And all of a sudden, you're the only one talking about it. And they're like, holy cow. Sometimes it's a matter of just finding the right audience for an idea that's already proven and established.
Love it. Love it. Bo, I mean, I'm sitting here like a chicken, like just nodding my hand and doing the thumbs up all the time. I'm loving this. This is great. And I can see how this plays because I like the idea of the sharpen specifically in my space because there's a lot of ideas that we share and you can kind of take ownership and just adding that like your own edge to it. It's awesome. Bill, I need to wrap it up. Also cognizant of your time over there and what you're doing. It's like I really value your time, sir, and really appreciate you coming on and sharing so kind of generously with all the frameworks. And as I kind of say goodbye, I just want to like also ask you if you could just riff a little bit on where people can follow you, because we've spoken about the podcast, and I'm bringing the link up of the podcast, which is really a awesome vehicle. But you yourself are busy doing some videos on LinkedIn, sharing ideas. I've been following some of that. There's a group, I think, that you can join. If you like, please take the stage, and where can people follow you and check out what you're doing?
So I use two vehicles, short form and long form. So short form, I'm on LinkedIn. And if you want to follow me, you can search the hashtag orgtl, ORGTL. And that's my personal hashtag that I use for talking about thought leadership. And then you'll find links to the podcast is there. Feel free to send me a connection request or follow me. And if you're interested in thought leadership, as you can see by this conversation, I'm happy to sit down and geek out and talk about thought leadership all day long.
And design tools if you so wish. But that is
Oh, absolutely.
that's
Yep.
but then you have to invite me too. And just
Okay.
just to show you that we had some awesome responses here. I don't know why it's not staying on because I'm double clicking. We've got Shauna here. These are so aligned with the creative thinking techniques, which I agree with, Shauna. Definitely, thanks for that. And then also my good friend Joshua just reached out and he loved your comment around ideas as Lego bricks, which is spot on. So, Bill, I just want to say thanks again. All the best. We shall stay in touch because I always snoop around to see what you're up to next. Also, encourage you to check out their newsletter because this whole conversation was sparked by a newsletter that I received from you guys. So, Bill, thank you once again. Cheers to that. And
Cheers.
send all my love on that side. Cheers, man.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Take
Okay,
care, brother.
bye-bye.
Bye.
How was that? That was really cool, right? I'm really blessed to have some cool people that connect with me. And talking about cool people, I have someone else who's cool who hang out with me all the time. And I have to bring her on stage, find the right button, and hopefully she's there. And Tammy,
Hey,
how are you doing?
how you doing? I'm really good, really good.
Excellent. And I love the way that the camera is framed today. So now I can zoom you in and out.
I follow instructions.
Live
Werner.
production right here, Tammy. Live production.
I just wanted you to zoom out a little, zoom in, zoom out, just a little bit so you can see my book cover behind me.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Is that it?
No.
I want to zoom more. There it is.
Nope.
There it is. There it is. We can even do this, Tammy. Let me go over to Tammy full screen over there. Folks, just look there at the back of Tammy. Work from the inside out. Is that the other side, Tammy? Other side. Is that that's the final cover, right?
That's it.
Oh, congratulations!
There she be. That's it.
New York bestseller, #1 on the list. It's gonna happen.
From your mouth to Amazon's ears. I don't know.
Let me just clean up the screen. I've been bad with my production here today. Tammy, how's things going? Otherwise,
you know, it's going. Everything's going. It's moving forward, and yeah. So the book cover's finalized. That's a big one, and I'm still editing. Editing's a bigger process than I thought it would be. So,
and can I ask the golden question, which people probably annoyed by that question, is like, what is the estimate time of arrival? Is that shifted or is that still?
It has shifted. You know, it's a good lesson. So I don't have an exact date, but it's a good lesson in that, you know, everything usually takes longer than we think it will, right?
Yeah.
And yet, how often do we beat ourselves up over that? Or, you know, we give ourselves a hard time about these things. And I just decided, you know what? I want the book to be as great as it can be.
Yeah.
And I've got other things going on right now that are also very, very important. And so I have to do the best I can. And that means the book is going to be out a little later than I wanted it to be. And you know what? That's okay.
And Tammy, I think like, I mean, I'm joking around, but even during this pandemic, especially at the beginning, we were all rushing around trying to get things done, make noise, hit the deadlines, make sure we're doing all the stuff. And I think it's also a lesson that I've learned. I mean, I'm not talking about being lax or just missing deadlines and just for a bit, but there is sometimes where you say, what is important?
Exactly.
That's why I feel guilty
Well,
asking you, because it will be ready when it's ready. I'm just excited.
you know
That's all.
what, Werner? Guilt is a wasted emotion.
True. I
All
think you've
right.
pointed that out before.
I probably have, and yet we
Yeah.
all fall into guilt. But so don't feel guilty about asking. I appreciate you asking because it shows that you're interested, and I am deeply appreciative of that. And my goal is to get the book out late July or early August. So that's my hope. But I've been known to say things that don't happen. So
I've been there.
ta-da, I'm human. I'm human.
By the way, I
But,
want to
you
show you my
know,
new mug as well. Sorry, I'm
let's see,
digressing.
let's see. You're on mute. Is that aimed at certain people?
Yeah, it's
People who you'd like to put on
this is not
mute?
really a live stream mug. It's more of a like Zoom call meeting because, but the problem is that usually I am the one on mute. If you ask any of my friends, Tammy,
How
I
about
rudely
I'd like
cut you
to
off there.
put you on mute.
Maybe that's also true, right?
Oh,
Tammy,
it's not very coach-like.
flicking over. Oh, this is the wrong thing. I don't want to show this. I don't want to show this yet. I want to show this.
Oh, Rusty. You know how he got that name? I bet you can't guess.
No idea.
Really?
We should add like little laughter, like Friends or something in there.
Well, if you look at his hair color, I think that might have something to do with it. And he's a really interesting guy. I mean, here he was an international executive at Apple, and he asked for a demotion.
You see, my camera is not frozen. I am like.
I know.
Wow.
He asked for a demotion. So he was a director of international finance at Apple. He was pretty high up at Apple, and Stanford educated. I mean, Ivy League, the whole bit. Living in Silicon Valley, and he was never home. He had a kid, and he was never home. And he said, "You know what? I need to be home and be a father." So he basically went to his boss and he said, "You got to kick me down a notch because I do not want to be an absentee father." So that's what he did. And now he's, pivoted into coaching and other things. I think he realized his values were really drawing him in other directions. So that's what our conversation is about.
That's awesome. And Tammy, the other thing that I forgot to do, and in all seriousness, because I always have so much fun and I'm excited to press that button, is that for those watching, I have not introduced you. This is my good friend, Tammy Gulaloob. She's an executive and career coach. And she's also the host of Work from the Inside Out podcast. And you can see the latest episode here on screen. You can get more information at tammygulaloob.com/podcast. And I encourage you to go and subscribe. And I mean, do I have to say more? Look at Tammy. She's here. So,
you don't have to look that much. Yeah. Okay.
Listen.
Just listen.
Look. Yeah.
Don't look.
Tammy,
look at my beautiful mug.
Nicely. That's a nice ceramic
pottery on Cape Cod.
That's nice.
Yeah.
We are terrible. Anyway, good stuff.
No, we're not. It's good coffee.
Good coffee.
So, Werner, I've got a hard stop today. So
yes, let's do this.
What? Get to it.
How much time do you have?
I have something I have to do on the half hour.
Great. So I think we need to speed things up sometimes. And I think my friend Dale, she's a consultant, a senior consultant at a firm. I think you can see the firm over there.
I think we
And
see the firm. Yeah.
yeah, she's super talented. One of those people who've I've had the pleasure of working with, and also not sad in her job, but open for opportunities if someone looked at her profile. So, Tammy, over to you.
Okay. All right. So Dale, um, so when let me, my first question, I looked at Dale's profile previous to this, and my first question was, what is Dale looking for feedback on? Because as I scrolled through her profile, I said to myself, you know what? I'm looking through this profile, and honestly, I really I don't know much about Dale. This profile doesn't give me a lot of information. It's got the basics. There's a lot of things here that are filled in, but they're filled in minimal ways. My first reaction, or let's say, I don't know about reaction, but my first thought was, so Dale identifies very strongly with her firm because she's got it up in her banner. And my first question is, I probably have more questions than answers actually for Dale.
Yeah.
And maybe that will be helpful to
But
her.
yeah,
But my first question is, do you want to be strongly identified with your firm? Because that's what you're doing by putting that up in your banner. And so if that's a big part of your identity, a big part of who you are, that's what that says to me. And the photo, it's kind of cute. It's kind of like makes me wonder, like, who is she? I want to know her. And yet another part of me says, she's a little mysterious. I don't know if I feel engaged or not. Maybe I'm thinking about it too hard. I might want a photo that maybe is a little bit more, just give me a smile and show me who you are. It feels like you're holding back on me a little bit. Now, I may be overthinking that. The fact that she has a photo there is great. I would probably change the photo out to something that's just a little nicer, a little bit of a smile, and maybe, yeah, it just feels like she's hiding out a little bit there. There's something about that. But again, that's just my perception.
yeah,
I don't have a big problem with it. Her headline right under her name, it's great. It really gives you a clear sense of what her expertise is. The management consultant is very, very general, but it fits in with who she works for. She could even add maybe a couple of other details under her name if there were other things that she wants to be known for in terms of her expertise or credentials. So, management consultant, again, is very general. Digital enthusiast, very general. So if she wanted to name some kind of specialty or technical expertise that she would like to be hired for or known for, that would be great.
yeah.
Scrolling down a little bit more, again, not knowing exactly what she's looking for. Like, she's not unhappy, but might she want to be found or recruited somewhere else or for something else? She needs to do a few things. She needs to put a little bit more into her profile so that we know a little more about her.
Yeah.
Because the profiles are going to be keyword driven. The other thing that's going to drive traffic to her profile is her level of activity on LinkedIn. So we'll get to that in a moment. Her about section is, gives us a little bit of an idea of who she is. I think I'd like her to maybe expand on that a little bit more. For example, I love that she says she's passionate about the process of creating amazing digital and technology products that elevate the way in which humans interact with business. Perhaps she could give us a few examples or illustrate that in some way so that we have an idea of what does that look like?
Yeah.
Same thing with continuous and constant learning. She believes in that. Great. Tell me more. I just want to know a little more because these are very broad brushstrokes. She's giving us enough that I'm saying, I want to know more about this person. She sounds really
Yeah.
interesting, but I don't know in what ways she's doing this or what value is she bringing in what ways. It's like, well, I like these things, but I want to know who are you in these contexts
And
and which
Tammy,
things do you enjoy the most?
yeah, and Tammy, just because this is the interesting thing. I mean, like some of the people we've spoken about before. I mean, I've known them at some point
Yeah,
in my career, right? So, and Dale is one of those. And like
yeah,
when I listen to what you're saying, and I'm thinking, I'm kind of trying to think of the time I worked with Dale. Like when
yeah,
I look at this it feels very much like a agile kind of technology silo, which is fine because I think there's a
yeah,
lot of requirement for that. But the thing is,
yeah.
when I think of Dale, when we worked on those projects, man, I relied on her to really navigate some really scary waters. I mean, I remember we
Mm,
were on 2 projects together where it wasn't easy projects at all. But as a
mhm,
lead on the project, I felt so comfortable having Dale in the team with me. She just like
mhm,
exuded like we're in control. Don't worry. I know the ship is sinking
mhm.
a little bit, but I have a very big bucket. Don't worry, Vanner. So
I
and I don't
love that.
feel I don't feel like that's coming through. And I think that is one of Dale's biggest value propositions is exactly that.
So, and she could incorporate that in some ways, even to say something like, people count on me for this, or people have said that, I bring the calm in the midst of the chaos, or
Yeah.
that, I'm the anchor for the ship. You can even use metaphors are a beautiful thing to use in these contexts. So, if you don't know how to talk about yourself, which a lot of people don't, people are very uncomfortable with that, and not just uncomfortable, they kind of draw a blank. So I always say, ask people who've worked with you, what would they say about what you're like to work with? Or what value or what contributions did you make that they remember most about you? Um, or, what if they had to give you a nickname, what would the nickname be? The other thing you might recall on your own if you aren't reaching out to anyone or, for whatever reason don't want to, you can think about when people have thanked you for something, what did they thank you for? How did that make you feel? But those are the ones you're probably going to remember most. And those might be the things you're proudest of. Of course, you only
Yeah.
want to mention those things in your about section that you would want to do again. We're not asking you to mention everything you've ever done. So think about what you've been thanked for that you've been effective in and can really shine a light on. Because those are usually things that you're both strong at and you enjoy. So I always like to point out to people that don't just talk about your strengths because people will say, oh, I'm good at this, so I could do that.
Yeah.
It's like, that's great. Well, I'm really good at cleaning toilets. I'm really strong at that. I'm not going to put that on my resume because I don't want to be paid to do that. In
It's
fact, I don't want to, I
that's a
don't even
mistake.
want to
Yeah.
do that at all. So, you
Yeah.
want to,
I do it all the
you really
time.
want to,
I've scrubbed that thing. Yeah, I can be a
I've scrubbed
scrubber.
that. And you know what? Not only do I not want to be paid to do that, I'm going to pay someone else to do it. So, so, I use that as an example because it's generally one of those things that most people don't enjoy. And I try to say, look, really shine a light on the things that you're good at or that you enjoy or
Yeah.
that you would like to learn more about, because those are the things you're going to be the most
And,
motivated
and
to
and
do.
tell me, maybe this leads into like this kind of like always keeping in mind who's reading the profile, because I think when someone reads the profile, that person's got a need, right? That person's got a
Mhm.
requirement. He's got a itch that needs to be scratched, and if it looks like you can
Mhm.
scratch that itch, he's going to want to talk to you. And if you're showing the wrong thing, that hey, I've scratched many backs in my life, Yeah, that's what I like. This is the person I want to talk to.
Well, it's true. However, there will be people who may look at your profile and say, oh, this person can't scratch my itch. That's
Yeah.
fine, because you don't want to be that. You don't want to be with that person who's, that's not the right match. But what I do know is that there will be that person who reads your profile and says, this is the kind of person we want on our team or we want to be working with. And it's got to feel right. So, you know, you can't really tailor your profile for anyone in particular. I mean, you might have an imaginary boss, imagine who your favorite boss would be and maybe tailor some of it in that way. But I would say first and foremost, show up as your real self,
Yeah.
because when you are being real and authentic, even though that word gets overused a lot, people pick up on that and they like that. They trust that. And when they feel that they can trust what they're reading about you, that's going to make them want to keep reading. And speaking of keep
Good
reading, why
point.
don't we keep going?
Yeah, you've got a hard stop. Let's do this.
Yeah. So I like that she included a quote. Looks like she has a nice favorite quote. That's a nice
Yeah.
touch. I like that. And her activity. So she's done some commenting. Looked like she commented on something that you posted. And I would encourage Dale to continue to, so she shared some things. And so important, sharing things, commenting, even when you share like a post that you liked, also go into the comment section under that thing that you shared, even if you've shared it, written something in the post area, even add something in the comment area. There's something about the algorithm that it brings it higher up for some reason. I don't really know how it works because I'm not a techie, but I know that these things do help. And so when you are on a very regular basis active on LinkedIn, that is going to draw the algorithm to your profile as well. So if you are hoping to be found by people, that's another way to just draw more traffic in your direction.
So just because now I'm also learning here. Do a post. Is this specifically for a share or for any post? Because you do a post.
You can do it for any post. So like, for example, any post. So if you post something and then in the first comment area, you can add another link to something that you want to call people's attention to, or you can put a couple of hashtags that supposedly that triggers something. Okay. Now, I could be wrong, but I've heard that it helps. I've heard that from a reliable source.
They have said, but we don't know who they are.
If somebody says that's not true, let us know. But I've heard that it certainly doesn't hurt. I know that.
Yeah.
But I believe that it can help to reinforce something by adding something in the comments as well as posting something. But I know that when you share somebody else's post, usually you add something above that,
Yep.
To say, I'm sharing this because, or I think this is a really good article, or whatever you say. But you can also then add something below. You want to also, of course, tag people who you want to make sure they see it, or maybe it's something that you think it relates to them, or you're trying to give them some credit, whatever it is. But tagging people is also a helpful thing. Now, some people tag the heck out of a post. There's a few people I know who tag me in a lot of their posts, and so I'm getting notified all the time that they're tagging me. Not you, Werner, not you. You can tag me all the time. So no, I actually am honored when people tag me, because it makes me feel like they are trying to either get my attention or think that I'll be interested in something they have to say, and I usually am. But there are some people who I do know get annoyed by that because I guess it sort of fills up their, I don't know what it fills up, but
Yeah,
I don't mind. I really don't mind.
yeah, and I've
But sometimes it
yeah,
can be a good way to just communicate with certain people.
yeah,
So it depends, but some people have like a huge, like almost a whole paragraph of tags
yeah.
that I've seen. But I think I know some people who do it. I guess it's effective for one
I
reason or
think it's
another.
for me. I have some. I mean, even the previous guest Bill, like he will tag me into the comments when he
Oh
posts
yeah,
something. When it's like, hey Vanner, I think this is relevant for Vanner, and then a bunch of other people. But I've
yeah,
never been back to a post that he's tagged me in where I went, it's not relevant. I think that's
right,
and like the way he sets it up. I also think that if he tags me in the comments, I don't get like a billion notifications all the time, because sometimes what people do is they tag me in the post, and then I
right.
get like every time someone reacts to that specific post, my phone goes crazy, and that's the thing that annoys
Yeah,
me a little bit.
yeah. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but I would rather be remembered than not. So,
Good point. Good point.
you know, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
You don't want to be forgotten. That's all I'll
never,
say.
never. Let's be remembered, Tammy.
That's right.
Okay.
So, Dale, um, you got to fill in some stuff here in your experience. You got to shine a light on your accomplishments here under each of these positions, at least the first few. People need to know not just what you've done, but what you've accomplished. So it's not about, putting in a whole list of things that you've done, just even a few key bullets stating what you've accomplished or the kinds of things that you've specialized in, and perhaps some metrics or either quantitative or qualitative of the outcomes or things that you feel particularly proud of that you would also enjoy doing again. And yeah, because otherwise, I, senior consultant at Deloitte tells me
Yeah,
absolutely nothing about what you're doing.
I was just double check, but I think you've done already. I just double checking because like I went from the iPad onto my laptop, and I can see like she
Oh,
just
that's
have.
right. That keeps happening when we talk
Yeah,
about
but
these things,
I
right?
checked on the actual website while you were talking, and
Yeah,
it's only the positions. I mean, she's done some really cool stuff, but there's no
I have no
description.
doubt.
Yeah,
Yeah. So no, I mean it's like all the groundwork is here, Dale. You've got all the basics down here now. Now you just got to fill in a few blanks in some of these cases. And the real trick here is to figure out what is it that you really want to get out of LinkedIn. You know, um, do you want to develop some new relationships? Do you want to engage in different groups or in different ways on LinkedIn? But if you're going to get more active, then people will check out your profile and they're going to want to know more about you and they're going to need more information.
good point. Good
You
point.
know?
Okay, going
Yeah,
education.
yeah. All kinds of good information.
Yeah,
This is all great. All good information and good stuff. We know some good things about you. Education, licenses and certifications, all very
yeah. Some
important.
good certifications there. Something. I
Mhm.
mean, I was a Salesforce consultant and leader. I never got one certification in Salesforce. I feel so guilty about that. So Dale, well done.
You do. Well, Werner, you should feel guilty about that.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
also what you said, that there's no time to, it's a wasted feeling. That's why I will not dwell on that for too long. It's already gone.
I just was surprised you even used the word guilt in front of me again.
Yeah, I need to be careful. I'm counting my
Well, you're
words at
kind
the
of
moment.
wasting my time by saying that.
Boom! If you had a microphone in your hand, you would have dropped it.
Yeah, I'm not dropping my microphone. It's too expensive.
You're
Ah,
being terrible
it's
today.
not even
So,
Friday and I'm already
yeah.
being snarky. All right. Skills
Okay.
and endorsements. Way to go, Dale. It's
She's
good.
rocking.
Now, Dale, you just got to make sure that the kinds of things you're being endorsed for are the things you want to be endorsed for. Because from what I see above, you are wanting to be kind of a digital person, and I'm not seeing a lot of digital
Yeah.
stuff here. So if people have endorsed you for digital stuff, then move it up above. Just,
Yeah.
plug it in.
She looks like me
put
at the
it up
moment. It's
there.
just marketing all over the place. Dale, what's
Yeah,
happening?
which is fine. But if you want to be known for some of those other things, my guess is you have been endorsed. They're probably just buried below that. People just haven't given you. You probably just don't have as many
I'll
endorsements.
click on it for a sec. There's marketing management, integrated marketing. But I mean, Dale does have a bit of a marketing agency background as well. I think a lot of that,
Yeah, I get it. So you could just you could also ask a few people who you trust to endorse you for some things if you want. The endorsements are very easy to get. I mean, people endorse me who don't even know me, endorse me for things. Some people have endorsed me for things I don't even do, which I think is kind of funny. So, but all I'm just saying is you have a choice as to what those 3 things that show up immediately are. Right now, it's just the 3 most frequent endorsements that are showing there. So
yeah.
you can move those around if you would like.
I actually did it
That's
the
all
other
I'm
day.
saying.
Thanks for that tip. I
Oh,
went
yeah?
in.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
I was like my biggest like endorsement or skill. It was like something really arbitrary. Like I was going, that's why people were
Yeah.
contacting me for JavaScript development or something, because I
Oh,
had that as a big,
really?
it was
Oh,
strange. So go look at that.
yeah.
That's a good one.
There you go. So now it'll be interesting to see
Oh,
if things shift a little bit. Oh, no, look
yeah.
at that recommendation.
Yeah, you need to put credible
Oh,
recommendations on your profile, Dale.
yes, definitely. What's wrong there? No.
That's an old one. She only has
Yeah.
2018 and 2012.
Yeah, so Dale, I would suggest, you can ask anybody who's a connection of yours on LinkedIn already. You can ask them to give you a recommendation. So you just go into, there's an area in your profile. Um, it's in the area that says profile. You go in there and under your connections, and you can say request recommendations, and you can ask people to do that, and you can say, look, I'll do one for you too. So think of people you'd like to recommend and do one for each other, and maybe get even 1 or 2 that just are more current would
Super
be a great
important,
thing.
I think. Super important.
Yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah.
Definitely helpful. And these are all great things, just additional things that you've done that add to your credentials.
She speaks
And you've already
Afrikaans.
shortened. Yeah. Excellent. Always
Yeah.
good to have another language. And you've shortened your LinkedIn URL, which is great.
Yeah.
And you have your phone and your email, which is wonderful. Some people don't include that. I don't know why. I think it's great to be able to reach out and touch someone.
Yeah. And if you're watching this live stream, please send Dale a nice email with a nice inspirational quote in it.
There you go. And then your interests. So some of those are, different interests that you have. I love the fact that you've included causes that you care about, Dale, because I think that gives us a view of who you are as a person, not just who you are at Deloitte. So I really like
That's awesome,
that.
yeah.
I like that you've shared that with us.
You can't see it, but there's animal welfare, children. It's really cool. And I know she's really active in that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And then your interests and, any groups that you want to be involved with. And groups are a great way to expand your network. Groups are also good because any other group members are people that you will have easier access to simply because you're both in a group together versus if somebody was a 3rd or 4th degree connection on LinkedIn, but you weren't in a group together, it would be harder for you to have direct contact with them. So groups are great in that way.
Tammy, just as a quick question, I know we're getting close to, we need to wrap up, but the group thing has been kind of mulling, and I've joined a couple of groups over the years, but but I find myself not being super active in them, and I need to be more intentional. But are you using groups a lot? Are you diving into some of these groups? What is your experience with LinkedIn groups?
Um, I personally have not been very active in groups. I think that I recommend it though, especially if you are looking for something very specific. So if there's a specific reason or purpose for you to engage with either a particular group of people, or you have
Yeah,
specific set of questions you're trying to get answered, you might, or you have a particular message you're trying to send. So for example, when my book comes out, I might post in groups about my book
yeah,
to let people know. Also, it used to be a lot easier to get a better feel or understanding of what the level of activity was in a group, and what the demographics of the group were, and that impacted the way I would interact in certain groups.
yeah,
So if I knew that there were um, a certain percentage of people in the Boston area where I live in that group, or people who worked at a certain level, you used to be able to get that information very easily. They don't give that to you anymore, which is unfortunate. um,
I,
and
I think they have a little bit of
even
work
with
to
a
do in the
paid
groups.
account.
Yeah,
But I
I
think
yeah,
I think if you can find a group that you can tell by clicking in there that there's some activity, you can definitely develop some nice connections
yeah.
with some colleagues and people who have some shared interests, or people who could be potential clients, or there's all kinds of things that you can get out of groups. You have to spend some time and give it some attention. Um, but I'm active on LinkedIn in terms of just the general, sort of the general scrolling through the
Yeah.
day-to-day posts and things. And then there are certain people who I interact with very regularly, or I respond to. And that's pretty much what I do. But I don't I if I had more time, I'd probably get into the groups more, and I think I will at some point.
Tammy and Dale. Dale, thank you for sharing your profile. I hope this has
Yeah,
been
thank you,
useful.
Dale.
Yeah, you're a legend and good luck with all your activities. Tammy, I know you have a hard stop, so I just want to say
I
thank you.
do.
We
My
have a
pleasure.
meeting that we need to schedule soon and have a conversation.
Yes.
Put heads together to strategize a little bit. Yeah.
Yes.
So Tammy, thank you once again. Go have the next cup of coffee, next meetings. Best of luck, and I'll catch
I
you
will.
in the next one, if
All
not
right.
sooner.
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Werner. It's
Bye-bye.
always a pleasure. All right. Bye.
Bye. Well, there you have it. End of another live stream, a little bit sooner, a little bit quicker, but I think it has also been super useful. Tammy's 100% rocking it again. And then also thanks again to Bill Sherman, who shared his ideas and thoughts around thought leadership. And I think that's super useful. I'm going to definitely implement a lot of that, lots to think about. And then in the next show, or the next show is going to be in 2 weeks' time, I'm taking a little bit of a break. You have to do that sometimes. But in the meantime, I want to invite you to join my mailing list. It's at thecreativecopybreak.live. It's not a spam list. I'm not going to send you offers and all kinds of things. It's just a notification of what's happening, so that I can also tell you what is coming up and coming episodes, specifically the topics and when I'm going live, because there's a few interesting guests coming up. And for the next show, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint, because I'm super excited about this one as well. Thanks to Tammy for hooking me up. I'm going to have the author Jeff Gothald on the show in 2 weeks' time. He wrote a new book around careers. If you're in the user experience design space, you will know him from Lean UX. He's going to be an interesting conversation as well. So I'm really excited to have him on. And then also we're going to dip into event design later on in some of the other shows. And got some interesting things coming up. So want to invite you to jump into my mailing list, and I'll keep you up to date with what's going on. And as always, thank you for watching. And if you've been watching to this point, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, so that I can at least know that you're there. And even if you're watching the recorded version of this, once again, thank you for watching, and catch you in the comments. Ciao.